You wonder why our test scores are so bad? Because they're not concerned about teaching our children how to read and write. They're more concerned about teaching them how to protest, how to march through the street, how to speak injustice. They're more concerned about that. They're not concerned about teaching our children how to read and write. They're more concerned about teaching our children how to protest. Thank you so much for liking your comments and subscribing to the channel. Please share this with your friends. Smash that like button. Smash the subscription bell. Share this with everybody you know. We're trying to make sure people understand that they're not victims, that they are empowered for greatness, and all this stuff that's out here that's telling them otherwise is false and will not benefit them in the end. So please, I appreciate that. Share that. You know, the Bible talks about children being the heritage of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is his reward. God places high value on children, and he gives parents that wonderful privilege of shepherding those children into the kingdom of God. That's a major reason for marriage, is for the next generation, godly seed, if you will, for the Lord to have another generation. And unfortunately, so many Christians have abdicated that role. But I see the tide is turning. A number of parents have risen up in the past year and a half with all the craziness going on with lockdowns and mask mandates, and especially with all the critical race theory junk that school boards are pushing, as well as all the other LGBTQ, queer, and porn and all the other things that parents are having to face because there are books in the classroom that actually talk about that.
After seeing a September 9th school board meeting in Texas on pornography in the schools, I decided to check the titles at my child's school, Fairfax High School. The books were available, and we checked them out. Both of these books include pedophilia, sex between men and boys.
You see, there are books that schools and school boards have approved without parents' consent. And a lot of politicians don't want parents to be involved in the schooling of their children. They want the parents to stay in the dark as they were pre-pandemic and continue to indoctrinate them in these factories, these indoctrination factories. Well, something happened on the way to full indoctrination for the children. Parents woke up. And so there have been a number of parents speaking out about the things that their children are being taught. I mean, there have been some fireworks at school board meetings across the country in the past year and a half. And so because of all that, it seems that the National School Boards Association has had enough. They have written a letter to President Biden saying that America's public schools and its education leaders are under an imminent and immediate threat. They are calling parents domestic terrorists. They want President Biden to label parents who have been fighting just to have a say in how their children are educated as domestic terrorists. If you look through this letter, it is so full of hyperbole. It is so full of conflation. It is so full of things that are not true. While yes, there have been disruptions. Yes, there have been people saying things at school board meetings. There have been outbursts at school board meetings. And here, I don't condone any violence. I mean, these school board people are trying to do the best they can. The majority of them. They do not have an agenda. They ran for an office to be public servants. But there are some that have the agenda of indoctrination. And those are the ones that probably led them to write this letter because they are feeling the pressure. Because for so many years, Parents didn't go to school board meetings. For so many years, parents just sat by and let the public school indoctrinate their children. And then after 18 some odd years, the parents recognized that this is not my child. What happened to my child? Well, your child was in an indoctrination facility 5 days a week, 8 to 9 hours a day. This is what you get. Everything that you've planted inside that child has been removed and replaced with Marxist, communist, socialist, secularist ideology. And that's what has happened. And so I applaud parents that have taken that power back, who have taken their children out of public school, who have homeschooled them, have tried to place them in a private school. But the sad thing about it is a lot of private schools, especially Christian schools, are not standing up for righteousness anymore. They are bowing the knee to the government. They are bowing the knee to the decisions made by, let's say, the school boards. They are doing the same thing. So we have to be careful, even when it comes to some Christian schools, because like I said in a prior video, a lot of Christian schools are Christian in name only. It's just a veneer. There's nothing underneath that. But when you look at this letter, it's funny. They are calling parents who are expressing their First Amendment right to protest domestic terrorists. And they want the president to send the FBI to enforce some kind of barrier to stop these parents from coming and disrupting their school board meetings. Are we living in America, or is this communist China? Are we in Russia? The fact that these school board members feel threatened because parents are finally speaking out and waking up to how their children are being educated is appalling to me. All of this time, parents have not said anything. But as soon as the parents speak up, they want to request that President Biden call them domestic terrorists so they can send the FBI and come in and disrupt any type of protest that goes on at a school board meeting. I didn't hear anybody complaining last year when the peaceful protests were happening all across this nation. When Antifa and Black Lives Matter was destroying property and buildings and people were getting shot and killed, all in the name of St. George Floyd. But I didn't hear anybody complaining about that. Oh, they're expressing their First Amendment right to protest. Protest is the voice of the unheard. Protest is the voice of the unheard. Well, parents are saying, I haven't been heard, so I'm protesting. Why is it okay for people on the left to protest and destroy property, but parents who come and have facts, who are actually there for their children, they want them labeled as domestic terrorists? You got to understand something. It's all an agenda. They've been attempting for years. They have been on that slow march through the institutions, and public education was one of the first ones that they targeted, because they knew if they can get the minds of the children, then they can shape the future generations. And so that has been the plan and the plot of the communists and the Marxists all along, to get the children, to get the public education system in their back pocket, so they can turn these children into radicals. You wonder why our test scores are so bad? Because they're not concerned about teaching our children how to read and write. They're more concerned about teaching them how to protest, how to march through the street, how to speak injustice. They're more concerned about that. They're not concerned about teaching our children how to read and write. They're more concerned about teaching our children how to protest, because they want to use them to destroy this country. They're using anything that they can to create division, to create fissures in this country so they can divide us. But as soon as parents say, no, I'm not having that anymore, you're not using my child as a tool to destroy this nation, oh, they want to send a letter to President Biden saying that you need to label them as domestic terrorists. That is absurd, and that is wrong. And so parents, I encourage you to continue speaking out. Continue to make your voice known, because we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness, and we have to refuse to let the government and let the school boards and let the bureaucrats on those school boards who want to indoctrinate our children. We have to stand up and say, no, you will not use our children in your tool anymore. Our children will not be a tool for you to use to destroy this nation. You will not indoctrinate my child anymore. You will not take out the things I'm placing inside of them and replace them with things that I do not approve or recognize. You will not teach my child about Steve and Dan, or Sally and Patty. You will not teach them about that. We send our children to school to learn how to read and write, not to learn how to protest, not to learn the language of protesting. That's not the purpose of school. That's not the purpose of it. At least that's not what I think it is, but a lot of these administrators think it is. They think it is. And just recently, California is going to mandate that all students, public and private, need to be vaccinated. So now we got to make a decision, parents. Are we going to let our children be victims, be guinea pigs? Are we? Or are we going to stand our ground? I think it's time to stand our ground. We're not victims. We are empowered for greatness. And they can label us as domestic terrorists. See, they're doing that so they can separate. They're doing that so they can isolate. They're doing it so they can put us eventually on no-fly list. And eventually they can condone the killing of terrorists. Yeah, they can condone it or lock us up. That's why they want to label us domestic terrorists. That's why. Why else would these people write to President Biden and ask him to label these law-abiding parents as domestic terrorists? Why? Because of a threat, an imminent and immediate threat. They're not immediately threatened. The parents are frustrated and angry. If you can't deal with an angry parent, then you need to get off the school board. Honestly, if you can't deal with an angry parent, you know why you're angry? Because the parents are exposing your agenda. That's why you're angry. You're angry because you don't want your agenda to be derailed. You don't want your intentions to be exposed, but they are. And so that makes you angry. And so now you're writing a letter to President Biden. That's wrong. That is wrong. And I'll say it again. Any threat to anyone is wrong. I do not advocate violence in any way. The Lord fights our battles. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. The Lord fights my battles. But I tell you one thing, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. See, we're fighting against spirits. There's spirits that are operating behind the school board. There's spirits operating behind politicians. that want to destroy this nation. It's demonic. It's satanic. That's what's in operation. So we don't fight against that in flesh and blood, in our natural man. We fight that spiritually. But we make our voices known. Because we are not victims. We are empowered for greatness. And the simple fact that the National School Boards Association are so threatened that they'll write a letter to President Biden means something. That means that the voices of the parents are being heard. So continue to speak out. Continue to speak up. These are our children. This is our future. And if we don't want our country to become like Venezuela, let's speak out. We're not victims. We are empowered for greatness.